title of last week's podcast was We're Heating Up. I probably should have saved it for this week. We're now getting into the meat of tournament determining schedule. This is where you're going to start to see teams separate themselves from the pack. This is where you're going to start to see people become who they are in March and hopefully in April for all the teams that are really now gunning for a tournament spot. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Lynch, your host. Welcome to Puck University. Going to take a look around the college hockey landscape at one of the more interesting times of the season, one of the more curious points of the year. And I'm going to start off this first bit. I've got a question. Who's in the NCAA tournament? Like, who today has done enough to get themselves into the NCAA tournament? No questions asked. Just don't fall apart down the stretch. You're in. Well, considering that the pairwise is now the biggest determining factor, and if you've been paying attention to it for a while now, it's kind of an interesting time to start getting into it. If you haven't been paying attention to it, the pairwise becomes the deal breaker now. All 60 are ranked up. Who's in the tournament right now? Who, without having to do much more, who's in? Well, I would say spots 1 to 5 pretty solidly locked in, almost no doubt about it, going to the tournament. I say almost because stupid things happen in sports, and you have to be prepared for potential contingency plans. And you have to be ready for things that can go wrong. But, assuming that stupid things don't happen, spots 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, those teams in order from 5 to 1. The Ohio State Buckeyes, 15, 5, and 4 overall. They sit in first place in the Big Ten at 8, 3, and 3. They're in fact one of only 2 teams that is over 500 definitively, clearly over 500 in Big Ten play. That other team who's over 500 is Minnesota, and they're 9, 10, and 4. They currently sit 25th and definitely outside NCAA tournament consideration unless the Gophers ramp it up in the later stretches and make some noise. They're going to have to win the Big Ten outright in order to get in. It's surprising, then, that they're the only team that is currently – the Buckeyes right now are the only team from the Big Ten that's a surefire lock to get in. We'll talk about everyone else. There are 3 NCHC schools here. Minnesota Duluth is fourth. Denver is third, and St. Cloud State is 1. All 3 of those schools were expected to be great. I will have a lot of egg on my face for saying that I didn't think Denver would adjust that well without Jim Montgomery behind the bench. I did not realize what kind of coach David Carl would be. I was absolutely wrong about that. They have been spectacular this season. They've been their normal old Denver selves. Liam Finley has really stepped into that role of being a big-time player. Jared Lucas-Savage has continued to be superb. They continue to get great goaltending from Devin Cooley. That part surprised me a little bit because how do you go from Tanner Gillette, who was so great for a number of years in Denver, to anyone else? They've made that transition very, very, very well. Good on them for being able to make that transition well, and it is the model by which I think other teams really should look into their transition. And should look into they haven't lost a game since Friday, December 7th. They did have kind of an odd weekend. So, ever since then, they beat North Dakota in overtime, swept Merrimack and Lowell on their East Coast trip, went to Wisconsin and won 2 games there. Those 2 will be their last non-conference games before the tournament. I say before the tournament because, again, barring something really bad happening, Denver will be there. They swept Nebraska-Omaha 1-0 and 3-2 because there is no weak way through the NCHC. They then, on Saturday, tied Colorado College. But they only played one game. They played on the 19th, Saturday. They did not play on Friday night. Well, they ran into some weather issues. They ran into some problems. So they have rescheduled that game to be played at the Broadmoor World Arena in Colorado College for February, Tuesday the 26th. Because we were hit by a series of storms, and I guess Denver got hit by it as well. So that's just kind of an odd, funky part of the schedule that where things ended up not really going in their favor for being able to play all their games, which is unfortunate. But and then the one game they did play, it was a 4-4 tie against the Tigers of Colorado College, who are 8-12-3. But really, in these kind of in these sorts of rivalry games, and CC and Denver, absolutely a rivalry game. Any argument otherwise is just wrong. It always comes down to whoever wants it a bit more. 3 goals in each the first and the second period. 3 of the Colorado College goals were on the power play. Trey Bradley and Trevor Gooch and Cristiano Versic, which is a great name, got power play goals. Bradley had a second one at even strength. It was the only CC goal at even strength. Denver committed 4 penalties for 19 total penalties in minutes. Liam Lancaster was hit with a 5-minute contact to the head and game misconduct, which that's going to draw some more reactions. That's going to draw some problems. Lucas Savage has had his 13th of the season. Liam Finley continues to be a big piece. But yeah, ended in a 4-4 tie. Denver doesn't have to do much more in order to win, in order to make it into the NCAA tournament. They sit at 14-4-3 in the hardest conference in the country. They sit 3rd in NCHC play with 1 shootout win. By the way, there's shootouts in the NCHC, and Denver got that shootout win. The second place team in the NCHC is also the 3rd team in the pairwise right now, and that's Minnesota Duluth. 14-6-2, 7-4-1. They're in no matter what at this point. Scott Sandelin has the best total package defensive core in the country, with just how many pairs he can roll out the door. And also, is the UMass people who hear this are going to have some questions about that when I say best total package, because they've proven it. All of their freshman defensemen last season, is their national championship team from last year, 5 of their defenders that they skated in each of the 2 Frozen Four games were freshmen, and 1 was a sophomore. And that was their best asset of their team. And until I see otherwise, they have the best total package decor in the entire nation. It is their defining piece. Ahead of Hunter Shepard, who's been very good this year. Ahead of everything else that they do, and they do a lot of things very well. It is simply a defensive unit that can roll people out the door and can roll pairs that very few can match up with. And that's why they're a threat to win it again this season. I should say I got it backwards. Duluth is 4th in the pairwise, and Denver is 3rd. The number 2 team is the first place team in Hockey East right now, and that's the Massachusetts Minutemen. 10-2-0 in Hockey East, 18-4-0. This is already the most talented team that the University of Massachusetts has ever had. This is already on the short list of the best seasons that the University of Massachusetts has ever had in ice hockey. This is already, you don't have to play another game, this is already one of the most memorable seasons that the University of Massachusetts has ever had. and yet there's so much room for so much more. And if they get, and when they get in, because at this point, unless they have a collapse, they're going to make it into the tournament, and they're going to make some big, big noise. They have the pieces to make it far. And I want to run through what were their losses this season. What were the University of Massachusetts losses so far this season? Because I feel like you can learn a bit from who they played, who they defeated, and who they lost. Because going into last weekend, there was some considerable noise and considerable talk about how UMass still had a whole bunch to prove. They didn't have anything to prove before the weekend started. They have even less nothing to prove after the weekend was all done. They are a great team. They're Hockey East's most talented team, top to bottom, right now. And they should be the favorite to go out and win the whole tournament. It'd be a great thing for that program. It'd be a great thing for that program. It already is. It already is for that school. It's already a great thing for that school. So their losses. Saturday, October 20th, they went to Value City Arena to play the Ohio State Buckeyes, who I already listed as being in the tournament, because they are. They lost 3-1, and they split a series because the Friday night they won 6-3. Certainly no shame in losing in Columbus. They did not lose another game after that until Friday, December 7th, 7 p.m. game in Hamden, atop York Hill, 4-0 in Quinnipiac's favor. Certainly no shame in losing to the, at the time, number 8 ranked Quinnipiac Bobcats, particularly in their building. That's a tough place to play. They came home and beat that same team 3-1. They closed out their first half with a 5-2 win over ranked Yale. I think they were ranked 18th at the time. Their first game back from break, January 4th, they hosted the University of Massachusetts Lowell. It's kind of a funny team for them to play because Norm Bazin has had Amherst's number for a very long time, in part admittedly because UMass wasn't very good at the same time when Norm Bazin was leading Lowell to its highest peaks. And it should be said also that Lowell is a very strange team. It's the mystery box team of Hockey East. They're in 5th place right now at 7-4-1. They've got 15 points. That's 3 behind the currently tied for 3rd Boston University and Boston College. And really, BU and BC, first off, BC has played 1 more game than Lowell at 13. BU has played 3 more games. They've played 15 of their conference games already. But their overall record doesn't really do them a lot of favors because BU is 9-9-3. They had a heartbreaking loss against Quinnipiac on Saturday in which former Terrier Brandon Fortunato landed 2 goals. And the second one came with seconds left. I think 1 or 2 seconds left on the clock. And there aren't many more brutal ways for a team to fall in a game. That's brutal. BC, meanwhile, 8-11-2. They are well under 500, and if the tournament were to be held today, neither of these teams would have a hope and prayer of making the tournament if it were on pairwise. Because there's the automatic bid opportunity, and because you should never sleep on BU and BC, well, don't sleep on BU and BC. They can certainly make some noise, and they've got plenty more to say through the bean pod. But that really remains to be seen at this point, I guess. Lowell fits into the conference as recent champions, recent dominance, and being a real puzzling team to try and, and sort out. In that game on the 4th, 3,000 people. It was on break. Kind of expected for that one. 3 penalties. Kenny Hausinger took an elbowing. Ryan Domowski took a hold. And Ivan Shukurov took a rough. The Hausinger penalty was late in the second. The Domowski and the Chukarov were both in the third. Otherwise, not a whole lot. The 3 goals. Reed Stephenson got one in the first. Connor Wilson got one in the second. Nico Hildenbrand got the Minutemen only tally, his second, their captain, on assists from Colin Felix and George Micah. Otherwise, Christopher Hernberg slammed the door shut with 33 saves on 34 shots faced. There is certainly no shame in losing to conference foe Lowell. There is certainly no shame in losing that game when you outshoot them like no one's business. And Lowell had a game in which their goalie stole for them. And then this past weekend, UMass's 4th loss. They first off, on Friday night at the Mullins Center, destroy Northeastern. And I mean thoroughly embarrassed. I don't think I can play the audio of it. I'd have to bleep some stuff out of what Jim Madigan said, but it was an absolute brutal destruction of a very proud team and a very respectable outfit in Jim Madigan's Northeastern University Huskies. And they got demolished. I think the shots were 30. I'm pulling up the box score right now so I can just not stab wildly in the dark. And by the way, 4,500 saw that game played. And the students were just getting back. I imagine that the Mullins Center will be full up for the rest of the season now. The shots ended up being UMass 38, Northeastern 16. The only goal that Northeastern got was when Tyler Madden scored a power play goal in one of the most bizarre sequences I've ever seen, in which Matt Murray was called for a 10-minute misconduct penalty. Not a major, not a contact to the head, not a slash, not a minor, not in anything. A 10-minute misconduct, which really means we didn't get any explanation from the official, and I won't speculate any more than just saying I have my guesses as to what drew it. But obviously, he drew it, and so there is a rule for this. There is actually a rule that if a goalie takes a major penalty, he is to serve said penalty by sitting in the box, and no one else may serve it for him. Now, you're probably thinking, that's a very strange image, seeing the goaltender in the penalty box for serving a penalty. In which, and my response to that is, well, yes, it is quite hilarious to imagine a goaltender sitting in the box because, well, it is. The rule, and this was tweeted out by Brian Smith. He is he's the communications director for Hockey East. He's one of the associate commissioners of Hockey East. This is from the NCAA Ice Hockey Rulebook. Rule 28, goalkeepers penalties. Rule 28.1 is the one you've heard of before. Minor penalty to goalkeeper. A goalkeeper shall not be sent to the penalty bench for an offense that incurs a minor penalty. Instead, the captain of the offending team shall designate another member of the team who was on the ice when the offense was committed to serve the penalty, and such substitute shall not be charged. Okay? So, also worth noting that it's the captain of the offending team. So, Nico Hildenbrand, for example, will designate another member of his own team. I think anyone with an A as well is allowed to do that too, so that would include Ferraro and Makar, I think. But for simplicity's sake, Hildenbrand is the one with the C on his jersey. Then there's Rule 28.2, major or misconduct penalty to goalkeeper. If a goalkeeper incurs a major or misconduct penalty, the goalkeeper shall serve the time penalty, but a substitute player in goalkeeper's equipment shall be allowed in the game, replacing some other player. When a major penalty is assessed, a player without goalkeeper's equipment shall go to the penalty bench with the goalkeeper and shall go on the ice in place of the penalized goalkeeper when the penalty time has expired. The penalized goalkeeper may not leave the penalty bench until the first stoppage in play after the expiration of the penalty. So, layman's terms, Matt Murray was whistled for an infraction, and he had to serve said infraction. In his place, Philip Lindberg, who was a gold medal winning World Junior winning goaltender for the Finnish national team, which, by the way, congratulations to Philip Lindberg for winning a gold medal and beating both Canada and the States in the process of getting there. That's just his team had an incredible tournament. Murray went out, Lindberg went in. And in his place, Lindberg had the only penalty called against him. He faced 5 shots, 4 of them went in. And Madden was the only one to get a goal through him. But other than that, it was a demolition. And then the next night, UMass, you might be able to argue, played even better because that sheet at Matthews plays into the ability to skate with speed, to attack, it plays into one of the best strengths of the Minutemen's roster, and that is they can play with a ridiculous amount of speed. 2 strides, Cale Makar's up the ice. Ferraro's not slow on his feet either. Ty Farmer and Mark Del Gaizo are also not slow. Mitchell Chafee can move. Brett Boeing might be old, but he is aggressive and relentless. Jake Gaudette, Jacob Pritchard, and John Leonard also can move with speed. That ice sheet and that building plays into what UMass can do very, very well. It's what Northeastern has built their brand on over the last couple of years with your Sakuras and Stevens and Gaudettes, and what continues this season with Madden and those kind of players. And UMass played it very well and won the shot total 46-24. Most of the first period was pretty even. The second and third period, UMass absolutely played better, but Caden Primo bailed out his team a bunch of times with 45 saves on 46 shots faced. The only one he gave up was a really good shot to John Leonard, who, by the way, missed that 6-1 destruction that UMass put on because he was sick. Came back and didn't look like he was missing at all. The 2 Northeastern goals, Jeremy Davies, breakaway, goal. Overtime, Tyler Madden, breakaway, was contested by Greg Carvel, arguing that there should have been a penalty because the breakaway started in the UMass attacking end, which is they were attacking the end, which is right underneath the main part of the doghouse, right underneath that main balcony. But a referee's hand did not go up. They didn't call it a penalty, so Madden broke back the other way and roofed a very good shot on Matt Murray, who didn't play a bad game. He made some very good saves and gave his team a chance to win. But Caden Primo was spectacular, including a breakaway goal on breakaway opportunity that Cale Makar had late in the game. I think in the last minute of the game, he really played spectacular. He was a big piece of why they won and why they are doing as well as they are. And we'll get to where they are in the pairwise at this point. We'll get into the pairwise as we move on. Primo with a .922 save percentage to this point. Murray with a .934. He's tops in Hockey East right now. So, the 4 UMass losses. Ohio State, ranked team, no shame losing to them. Quinnipiac, on the road, no shame losing to them. 1 home loss to UMass Lowell, long-term rival. Mystery box team, can beat anybody, no shame there. And goaltender stole it. And at Matthews Arena, against a very good Northeastern team, goalie stole the game for them. 0 shame in any of these losses. Unless something bad happens, which is possible and I hope doesn't, they're in. And then, of course, St. Cloud. 17-3-2. They have the fewest losses in the nation. They are just elite. Not going to spend much more time arguing for them. We expected them to be elite. We expected them to be one of the top teams in the nation. We expected them to remember how poorly last season ended and not play down to that level again. We expected Brett Larson to transition in pretty nicely. He has done more than transition in nicely. He has made a perfect transition. And you could argue that he might win that he will have a chance to win the Penrose this year. I'd give it to Greg Carvel as the nation's best head coach because he took a team that a few years ago lost their last 17 games of the season to last season were 17-9. I think it was a 12-win improvement or something kind of crazy like that. And then this season, they're already at 18-4. It's an incredible turn. And really, many other years, I think Larson is your winner for the Penrose. This year, no. This year, that honor belongs to Greg Carvel, in my honest opinion. Great coach, Larson. He'll have many more opportunities to win that. But I don't really see a way that Carvel doesn't. Buck University will continue after this brief word. Win it. I should say also that St. Cloud is now the number one team in all the polls again after sweeping Western Michigan, who falls into a further down category of the bubble teams. So teams 5 through 1 are safe. Teams 6 through 10 are good, but could probably use a few more improvements. 10 to 6 in order from the last slot to the top. Number 10 is Clarkson. Number 9 is Cornell. Number 8 is Minnesota State. Number 7 is Northeastern, and number 6 is Quinnipiac. So Clarkson and Cornell shooting up the ladder here kind of recently and shooting up in a way that I don't know exactly how many people thought we would see from them because these were both, I don't want to say dead-in-the-water teams, but teams that had a lot of questions. I mean, Cornell has just been injured up the wazoo. Before getting into it. They got swept on home ice by Minnesota State, ended up losing important games at home to Quinnipiac, at Madison Square Garden to Harvard, and against Dartmouth. But since that Dartmouth loss on November the 30th, they've won. They've gotten a point out of every game except one. One game where they didn't get a point at Quinnipiac on the 5th of January. So not a lot of shame in that. Beat Harvard, beat Princeton, swept Arizona State, beat Harvard again at home, and beat Dartmouth. They get Colgate this weekend. Then they get, in order, Union, RPI, Clarkson, St. Lawrence, Brown, Yale, RPI, Union, St. Lawrence, Clarkson, ending at Clarkson. There really is no clear, surefire way of making it through, quote, easy, close quote, in college hockey. You could say the same thing for Clarkson, and a bunch of their wins in the Pairwise have been really impressive. They beat Arizona State and Minnesota Duluth in the Desert Classic out at the Gila River Arena in Glendale. Overtime win against Vermont. And then since then, they've had 4 straight games of 4 goals or more over Union and RPI, and then over Yale and Brown. They get a home sequence they're on the road for Harvard and Dartmouth. My good friend Jason Scales, follow him at Pucking Off, which that's his personal hockey blog. I brought him on to help write with us at Inside Hockey to do similar kind of raps and stuff to what I've been doing for a little bit now. He'll be at the Clarkson-Harvard game. That should be a good time for them. So, yeah, Clarkson is sitting in that spot. So that's 2 ECAC teams right there. Minnesota State at 19-6-1. I think they're mostly safe. I mean, we kind of expected the Mavericks to be a contender again, and they're right about where we expect from them. Mark Michaelis has really turned into a good player. He's a 26-point collector. He's one of the better players in the WCHA. Jared Spooner has been very good throughout the season. This is a team that they can make some noise. I said the same thing last season, and they had the fortune or misfortune of having to play Minnesota Duluth in round 1 of the tournament. And Dryden McKay, which is a great name. That's just that sounds like Dryden McKay. That sounds like a hockey player's name. A freshman who's being tasked with big playing minutes. 19 games. 17 of them have been starts. He's got a .917 save percentage. A lot of the WCHA starters are a little bit down the way. Matthias Israelson has played in 9 games. He's one of the seniors on that Maverick team. So they have the pieces. I expect to see them in maybe a couple more wins down the stretch of tournament season for them, just to make absolutely certain, and also maybe to improve their standing so they maybe don't draw Duluth if they both get sent to the West Regional again this season, which is perfectly possible, or likewise for having to play Denver or something like that. You always want to make sure you can improve your standing. Not to say that there are any games when you get into the NCAA tournament that are easy. Playing Duluth and playing Denver are particularly difficult challenges because those programs have been here for years now. You can't call it a comeback. They never left. Looking through for what their schedule ends up being. They're at 19-6-1 overall, and they get all WCHA games the rest of the way. They get a trip to Northern Michigan, who's 21st, or 22nd in the Pairwise, I think 21 in the Cratch rankings. They are on the outside looking in right now. So they'll be a tough out at the Barry Events Center. Mankato hosts Alabama, then goes to Michigan Tech, kind of a similar position as Northern, but a little bit further down. They then go to Fairbanks, and then they return home to Mankato. So they get the difficulties of teams in desperate situations and also teams that are really far away from Minnesota. Have fun with that, boys. Northeastern, probably good. A win at the Beanpot would do wonders and would secure them a tournament spot. No doubt whatsoever. And a run to the Garden would secure it. And then Quinnipiac, they're just barely behind Ohio State. I think they're good. It's really quite impressive what Rand Pecknold has been able to do after they looked like they were going to be on the downswing after last season, because they made the transition to Division I hockey in 1999 when they were the Quinnipiac Braves. They played in the old MAC conference, MAAC. That became the Atlantic Hockey Conference. They were pretty good in that conference, but they made the transition to the ECAC in the 05-06 season. And every single year until the 17-18 season, every year until the 17-18 season, Quinnipiac was at least an over 500 team. And every year from 2012 to 2016, Quinnipiac was in the NCAA tournament. Then they missed out of the tournament in the 17 season. I don't know what the pairwise rankings were exactly, but I imagine because they lost to Harvard in the semifinals of the ECAC that year when Harvard was a juggernaut. I can't help but wonder if Harvard ends up, if they end up losing that game, do they somehow, if Quinnipiac ends up beating Harvard in that semifinal game at Lake Placid, I can't help but wonder if they climb the pairwise enough or if they would have had to win the ECAC outright. So a team that's retooled, particularly Andrew Shortridge has been incredible this season. There isn't a goaltender who's had a better year to this point, in my honest estimation, because had an enormous shutout against UMass, has 3 shutties in total. It's been just incredible. A goals allowed average of 115, which means he's playing behind a great defensive unit and he's doing well himself. And a 956 save percentage. That's a full 16 points higher than Tommy Napier, who's second at 940. 940 is also amazing. 956 is otherworldly, and he's at this point the favorite for the Richter Award. And not a lot of games played, I'll admit that. 13 played, 12 started because Keith Petrozelli also draws a lot of games because of his draft status and all that. So totally get that. But Shortridge has really been superb through this segment of the season, and they've got a bunch more. And Quinnipiac has a bit of time off because their travel partner, Princeton, is sitting for exams right about now. And so they can't go out and do conference games because Princeton isn't going with them, and it's hard to do scheduling. So they played last night. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. They played last night in Hamden. 4-1 win over Holy Cross, in which they were absolutely the better team. And the only goal that Holy Cross got was a Patrick O'Leary goal off a mishandled puck by Shortridge behind his own net. And O'Leary took it, put it in the net, and I felt so bad because that probably should have been a shutout. No disrespect to Holy Cross, but that game probably should have been a shutout. And that's just really, really unfortunate. I'm sorry, guys. So they get a bit of time off. February 1st and 2nd, they travel to North Country, Clarkson and St. Lawrence in that order. They don't return home until the 8th, and it's a big one. Yale pays a visit to the bank, Frank A. Perotti Jr. rink. That is pretty particularly important. Then the Union game is also important, and then they end by visiting Yale on March 2nd. There's plenty of big hockey for Quinnipiac yet to play. Then from teams 11 to 16, I think, are the other spots. And actually, no, I'll cut it off at 11 to 15 because 16, there is one team from Atlantic Hockey. There is not a team from Atlantic Hockey who is in the rankings this high. So, and one spot of the 16 teams that make the NCAA tournament will always go to an Atlantic Hockey representative. So, these teams are on the bubble, and should a situation like last year in which teams outside the bubble end up winning the conference tournaments outright, these teams are the ones that drop. So from bottom to top, 15 to 11. Union College, Western Michigan, Notre Dame, Bowling Green, and Arizona State. Union's interesting. Union started off the year really pretty well. Currently, their killer loss right now is they ended up beating Northeastern twice at Matthews. They ended up getting a tie against Omaha, which is hurting them in the pairwise. Tie against Yale, but ended up beating them in a shootout. Beat BU 2-1 to win the Friendship 4. Tie against Brown is not very good. Tie against Canisius is not really helping them. And they are 4-5-1 in the conference right now. And a bad loss, 2 bad losses to Brown and Clarkson. 6-3 and 5-1 respectively are the ones that are having them down a bit further. They're going to need to up their conference record at least over 500 to have a real shot. Western, I got to watch that team in Vegas, and that's a fun, speedy team that really, really can't play well. They got swept by St. Cloud, and, that'll happen when you go up to the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. I understand that, so I'm not going to hold that too far over their head. And it's all NCHC games for them, so that's A, good opportunities for them to make some noise and climb up the standings a bit, and B, this could be very, very hard. As they host Denver, then they go to Omaha, then they host North Dakota, then they go to Colorado College, then they host St. Cloud, and then they go to Miami. There's not a break in that schedule. There's not a break in the opportunities to slip up. There's also not a break in the opportunities to climb. So Western's a bubble team. One other one that I didn't expect to be a bubble team was Notre Dame. 13, 8-2 overall. They're 6-1-1. Means one shootout win. And okay, I don't really get this team. I mean it genuinely. I don't get this team. Cale Morris has been incredible as ever, and there were a lot of pieces from last year, from the last two Frozen Four teams that departed, and I get that, including from last year's national runner-up team. So it's kind of a funny situation that they end up falling in. But the killer losses, they got killed 5-1 on home ice by Minnesota and then lost 2-1 the next day. They lost the outdoor game at Notre Dame Stadium, which does count in these standings, 4-2 to Michigan. They got murdered 9-1 by Penn State against a Penn State Nittany Lion team that can score on you in a heartbeat if you have any form of slip-up. And it's a middling Big Ten schedule that is currently keeping them in the we think we're making it, but we don't know yet, which is a terrifying position in which to be. You know, there's no security. There isn't, and they've got to pull up with a couple more wins. It's all Big Ten games from here on out. They start with Michigan State, who's kind of resurgent and has the nation's leading scorer in Taro Hersey. Hirose, excuse me, at 29 assists and 40 points, who, on a better team, really is that simple. If Hirose is playing on a better team, where Michigan State, they're not bad, but they're not a championship contender. Part of why Cale Makar is a Hobie Baker candidate, and in my opinion the favorite, is because he's playing on a championship team. Any other year, or you throw Hirose on a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament, or more likely than not going to make the NCAA tournament, he's a bigger candidate for the Hobie. Now that's kind of a shame. And Notre Dame has to contend with him on the 25th and 26th at home. Then at Ohio State, there's one random Tuesday game on the 12th when they host Michigan. Then they get the Badgers at home, Gophers on the road, Nittany Lions at home. Have fun with that, guys. And they've got opportunities. All these teams have opportunities. Bowling Green above them. This has been, for much of the season, one of the best defensive teams of the season. They've lived and died. In fact, they have the best goals against average at 180. That's 1.80. Their goal margin on the season is plus 36. And a lot of that is on an opportunistic defense that can clear stuff away. They are one of 5 teams with a goals against average underneath 2. The others, Duluth, UMass, Clarkson, Quinnipiac. If you are in that sort of conversation, then you are making the tournament, which is weird because Northern Michigan is 7th, and they're currently on the outside looking in, but they could certainly win the tournament and get themselves in that way. So Bowling Green, a little bit more offensive production. Secure yourselves a spot. It would give 2 WCHA teams spots in the big dance. You get the under-18 team, and that was back in November. The schedule wasn't really helping me out here. So they get Ferris State at home, Northern Michigan on the road, hosting Alaska, going to Bemidji, and then hosting Alabama. So they have one benefit that Mankato does not have. They don't have stupid levels of traveling, which does make a big impact on how exhausted and how tired you can get, which has a big impact on how you play. I do not care what the argument opposed to that is. Tiredness has an enormous impact, and you cannot possibly downplay it. And then the most interesting team in all of this tournament talk, the Arizona State Sun Devils, who, if we were having a tournament today, would be in the tournament, which is crazy. The last time we had an independent team in the NCAA tournament was the 91-92 season when Alaska made it in. The Seawolves, I should say. And they've had kind of an up-and-down stretch recently. They got shut out by Clarkson 3-0 in their hosting tournament, the Desert Classic. They then tied Mankato 2-2, which Johnny Walker looked like himself again. hosted BC and won both of those games 5-2 and 2-0. Then went to Cornell, and there's not a lot of shame in going to Cornell because it's a hard place to play, but got killed 6-1, in which, again, Walker is their best skater and had a very good game. He had 1 goal, which is good compared to everyone else because they got killed 6-1. And then the other night, the Saturday night game, 3-2. Cam Donaldson with 2 goals, Morgan Barron with the third on a power play. And there were 2 ASU goals by Jared Gurley and Brinson Paschunk, I think is how you pronounce it. They have some pieces. They have a great goalie in Joey Dackert, who's got the most shutouts in the country. It's a great team. It's a great story as well. They're probably a little bit ahead of schedule, but it is a great accomplishment for them to be even this close and even be here. And they have a very curious schedule from here on out. BU at home. In Boston. I'll be at the Friday night game. At RIT at the Gene Poliseni Center. A very hard place to play. Hosting American International College, who was first place in Atlantic hockey. Who's certainly got plenty of noise to make. And then they travel to Mariucci to play the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And the Gophers are surging at this point. So those are the teams that are currently in the tournament in the 3 different groupings. Now, some notable teams who are on the outside looking in. Providence. I did not realize that the Providence Friars, I genuinely was shocked when I noticed that Providence is currently, because if we're going to be real, at least one of these spots is going to go to an Atlantic hockey team. So the Friars have big stuff to play for because as of right now, they would miss the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, would mean that the Hockey East teams that would be representing them would be the Massachusetts Minutemen and Northeastern Huskies, which is very strange because there was a point in time in which these teams were not very good, and now they are the conference's best teams. That's very strange. Harvard's at 17. Penn State. Look, they have a great offense, but they have done nothing to inspire me that they can play good defense. They're at 18. UMass Lowell, who's climbed up in a big way, and mystery box team again. Lake Superior State at 20 and North Dakota at 21. Northern Michigan beat Yale and BU, and that next order are the next couple spots. So, we are now at make or break point of the season. We're now at the point where if you're going to make the NCAA tournament, which is the point of this operation, and then to win a national championship, you have to start making some noise this season. Atlantic hockey plays by a slightly different schedule, which I have to spend some time talking about this story. The American International Yellow Jackets, Mr. B, first place. This is already the best season that they've had. The 12 wins is a program record for Atlantic hockey consideration. 2-0 and 3-2 wins over Holy Cross on Thursday and Saturday night, respectively. And they've got... Boy, it's a really interesting schedule for them the rest of the way because they go to Mercyhurst, to Erie, Pennsylvania, and don't overlook them. They've got the leading scorer for defensemen in Joseph Duzak, played in 25 of his team's 26 games, 11 goals and 22 assists. Mind you, he's listed as a defenseman. Those numbers say otherwise, but, good on him. That's more points than Chase Prisky and Cale Makar, who are the 2 defensemen who are generally considered to be the best in the nation. So, have fun with that, boys. That's how they round out January. They only have 2 more home series after this. The first and second hosting Niagara, the 28th of February, and the 2nd of March, they host Sacred Heart. And then we get into Atlantic Hockey Playoffs. They already are pretty thoroughly assured of having the best seeding that they've ever had in the history of the tournament. Now it's just shoring up where exactly they'll be playing, particularly Air Force, a team that won't go away, and they're probably going to have to beat Air Force during somewhere along the Atlantic Hockey Tournament run. And they've proven they could do it. They shut them out 2 times, 4-zip and 5-zip on the 17th and 16th. I know I reversed those days, but I reversed the way I should have read those scores. They don't play Air Force again. They do travel to Army, and then they play a very critical non-conference series against the Arizona State Sun Devils. And that might be the most important series for both of these teams, because that would provide some real legitimacy to AIC. Some big-time, whoa, they played very well. They can put some fear into people if they can beat Arizona State. And also for the Sun Devils, every single game, because they don't have the benefit of playing in a conference. They have one way of getting in, and that is to win as many of these games as possible. They're the ones who are the easiest to slip out of tournament consideration, because if they don't play very well down the stretch of their season, they will not make the NCAA tournament. And if they fall and stumble to AIC, they're probably cooked. So this is where their schedule becomes really, really, really interesting. But that's not for a little bit of time. That series is the 15th and 16th of February. For now, the challenge for the Yellow Jackets is Mercyhurst, and they have to look at it as the challenge of it, because they have a couple games in hand over the Air Force Falcons. And that's not going to hold up once the schedule evens itself up, and you know Frank Saratori's team is going to come after you guys. It's a really interesting schedule, and it's a really interesting proposition for these guys, and I wish them the best of luck. Other notable games, I listed the ones that I will be at. There will be the Friday night game at Agganis Arena between the Sun Devils and BU Terriers. Also a pretty big game for determining some seeding and how that ends up working itself out. My guy Jason is going to the Harvard versus Clarkson game, and he'll also be looking into the rescheduled Mayor's Cup, which is going to be on Tuesday between Union and RPI, which looms very, very large, actually, in the pairwise rankings. And also, it's a rivalry game between two schools that have a lot of history with each other, and it should be a good time. The Saturday game that I'll be going to is another Hockey East game, in which Providence, who needs wins, and the Friars cannot afford to slip up, because I didn't realize that they were in as precarious a situation, but a tie with Sacred Heart, a pair of losses to UMass, in which Matt Murray stole those wins, both 3-2, a not very good performance against Denver, a 3-1 loss and a 4-4 tie, a 1-1 tie with New Hampshire, and then 3 losses to Boston schools, 4-2 to BC, 4-3 to BU, and 4-1 to BC in Conti. That is really putting a damper on the Providence schedule. And as of right now, they're the first team who would be eliminated from the tournament on the pairwise, they'd be the last team out, is the way I would put it. They're either the last team in or the last team out. It's kind of confusing the way the English language works itself out. But they're 16, they'd miss the tournament, and they have to put on a good showing against Northeastern, who also has to put on a good showing to remind people that they're going to secure and lock up their spot, and also to take a run at the Hockey East tournament, because this team is good enough to take a run at the Hockey East championship this year, as they were last year. Other notable games: UConn visits New Hampshire, UNH 8-7. Don't count out the Wildcats. Don't count them out. That's going to be pretty fun. Other notables: Penn State travels to Michigan. Penn State, show me something defensively. I really, really hope you guys do. That's at 7:30 at Yost. Those two teams will then play at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night. I wish I could be attending that game, but scheduling conflicts will not allow me to go down and see said contest. Other Big Ten series: Minnesota hosts Wisconsin. former Powers that are struggling and trying to figure themselves out. That'll be fun. Poor Sparty visits Notre Dame. 2 games. That should be a good time. The WCHA. Michigan Tech goes to Anchorage. I mentioned this earlier, but I'll reiterate. Northern Michigan hosts Mankato, which should be a great, great series. Ferris State goes to Bowling Green, and Bemidji goes to Lake Superior State. And the ECAC matchups. Harvard and Clarkson is really important and really interesting. And then Clarkson goes to Dartmouth the next night, which will also be important for their conference and all that stuff. Yale's the other team to pay attention to out of the ECAC teams that are going right now. They get Union and RPI this weekend, and that is really of critical importance for them moving forward. So we're at that point in the season. Every game gets a lot more important, and tournament time is almost upon us. Tick-tock for everybody who's got national tournament hopes, national championship hopes. You're on the clock. You don't have many more opportunities to try and improve your standing. This is your shot. There's only a few teams who are pretty much locked in. There's a lot of teams fighting for those remaining spots. Hope you'll be able to go along for the ride. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Puck University. Hope you are able to stay around and support us and listen to us whenever we have a new episode that comes up. You can follow me on the Twitters at @CCLynchWall. You can follow me on Instagram at CCLynch16. Go follow my friend Jason Scales at Pucking Off on Twitter. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Google, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and Blog Talk Radio. Thank you so very much for listening. Thank you so very much for continuing to care about college hockey in the way that you do. Best of luck to all of your teams. Best of luck moving forward. And in the words of the great Tim Williams, keep your head up and your hits clean.